The first sound you hear is a gavel striking, sharp, final, but it isn't the only sound. There's a low hum in the room, a whisper of tension that sticks to your skin like smoke. And then you see him. Not a stranger, not a defendant, but a face from your past. The boy who used to race you down dusty streets now standing behind bars, a lifetime of struggle written in the lines of his face. The air shifts, everything feels heavier, every breath is charged with memory. The hum becomes a drumbeat counting down to a moment you'll never forget. He looks up, and for a fraction of a second recognition passes between you. A spark of shared history, buried under decades of expectations, failures, and injustice. How does a lifetime split into two paths? One of rules and privilege, one of survival and suspicion? How does the world turn a friendship into a courtroom battle? You feel it in your chest, the weight of every choice, every injustice stacked one on top of another, and you know this is bigger than a case. This is about a life the system tried to erase, a story too raw to be reduced to facts and evidence. The room watches, unaware that what they see as a trial is really a collision of past and present. You remember summer nights under magnolia trees, voices quiet but daring, promising to look out for each other no matter what. The kind of bond the world resents because it refuses to see equality, refuses to see people as more than their skin, more than their circumstance. And now the boy who taught you courage is the man they suspect of crime. The man you know is more than this moment. And you realize as the prosecutor's words begin to echo that the system doesn't care about courage, it doesn't care about childhood bonds, about the choices the world forced him to make. It only cares about guilt and innocence, evidence and assumption. But you, watching it unfold, know the truth. AH is messier, more human, and infinitely harder to hold in your hands. For the next few minutes, the world outside the courtroom ceases to exist. There is only him, only the echo of what might have been, only the terrifying, unavoidable question, how many lives have been broken by systems that value appearances over reality, color over character, assumption over truth? And deep down, you know the answer is too many. The courtroom holds its breath as the bailiff calls the case. The state of Louisiana versus James Anderson. The name feels heavier than words. Your fingers graze the edge of the gavel, a weight you've held for years, and yet today it feels foreign. He steps forward, chains clinking, shoulders hunched, eyes that once sparkled with mischief now darkened by experience. And in that moment, the gap between childhood and now hits you like a punch you didn't see coming. The prosecutor launches into his narrative, clinical, detached, as if describing a piece of machinery instead of a man whose life has been fought for in shadows. Assault, robbery, resisting arrest. Words meant to define him, but they cannot capture the nights he spent awake, avoiding dangers the world never names. You watch the jury, and in their faces, you see the same questions everyone asks, guilt or innocence, but you know the real question is deeper. How much of a life can a few hours of alleged crime define? His eyes flicker toward yours, a brief acknowledgement, and then shame pushes them down. The world has taught him to bow, to hide, to assume guilt before innocence. You remember the creek where you first met, where the sun painted gold on your shoulders, where he trusted you without question. That trust now feels fragile, almost dangerous in a room built for judgment. And yet, even in chains, even under suspicion, there is a pulse of dignity you cannot ignore. The first witness is called, and the testimony begins like a slow storm. Every word is measured, rehearsed. Every claim feels designed to paint a picture that may or may not be real. You study him. Does he flinch? Does he crumble? No. His posture shifts slightly, subtle but undeniable, the kind of small rebellion that shows the fight hasn't left him. And you realize that's all it takes, one person who refuses to disappear into the narrative someone else wrote for them. Outside the courtroom, the world would see a crime. Inside, you see a system that punishes histories it never fully understands. Every glance from the jury, every scribble from reporters, every shuffle of papers becomes a drumbeat of tension, reminding you that justice isn't just about right or wrong, it's about seeing what others refuse to see, listening to what others refuse to hear. And in that silence, the truth begins to whisper. What we see on the surface is only a fraction of the story, and sometimes the story is screaming from behind the walls. He takes the stand. The chains rattle softly, a haunting percussion underscoring the weight of every moment. His voice is quiet at first, almost hesitant, but there's an honesty in it that no prosecutor can fabricate. "I didn't do this," he says. Not as a plea, but as a fact, a claim rooted in a life the world has never wanted to see fully. And suddenly the courtroom feels smaller, tighter, every eye turning, not just to the man, but to the history he carries like invisible armor. You remember the days when he trusted you implicitly, when secrets were shared under the stars, when danger was a game and the world outside couldn't touch you. That boy is buried under decades of survival, of assumptions, of every misstep society chose to define him by. And yet, here he is, standing, refusing to vanish into a stereotype, refusing to be reduced to a series of charges on a docket. You feel the tension radiate from him, a quiet defiance that is louder than any shout. The defense attorney presses forward, methodical, almost surgical. She dissects each accusation, challenges each assumption. The clerk's memory falters, the video grainy and inconclusive, and with every revelation, you see the cracks appear, not just in the case, but in the system itself. The jury shifts uncomfortably. Questions form on the edge of their minds. Can we trust what we've been told? Do we understand the man standing before us, or only the label he's been given? And then the human element strikes hardest. He speaks of walking home that night, of being stopped, of fear he cannot erase, of a world that decided his guilt without a glance at his truth. His words are simple, unadorned, yet they pierce deeper than evidence, deeper than law books. They are a mirror, reflecting the injustices that linger in quiet corners, the assumptions that poison judgment, the color lines that silently dictate destiny. And you, watching him, understand that this is not just a trial. It's a reckoning, a confrontation with every failure the world has forced upon him, and every failure we've allowed to pass without notice. Your heart tightens as he finishes. There is no dramatic flourish, no last-minute revelation, just the weight of honesty in a place built for assumption. And in that silence, the jury, the spectators, even you, cannot escape the truth staring them in the face. Life is never fair. Justice is never simple, and the people who suffer most are often those the system refuses to see. The next witness takes the stand and the room tightens again. Officer Harris, burly, grim, the embodiment of authority, leans into the microphone. His words are clipped, precise, each one carrying the weight of assumed certainty. He matched the description. That's all. Nothing more. No proof. No red hoodie found. No corroboration. Just a man, judged because he looks the part. And in that moment, the injustice is almost physical, a pressure on your chest, reminding you how easily society paints people into corners, the "I can't escape." You glance at him, and the subtle shift in his posture does not escape you. A small defiance, a hint that even under suspicion he refuses to disappear. Every word the officer utters feels like another brick in the wall of assumption surrounding him, but it's fragile, and the cracks are beginning to show. The defense attorney picks them apart slowly, deliberately. Did you search the area for evidence? Did you investigate his claims? No, no further questions. Silence fills the courtroom, heavier than any testimony. Outside, the world wants a villain. Inside, you see someone fighting to exist honestly in a space designed to define him as guilty. You remember the whispers from your childhood, sideways glances, judgment without cause. The unspoken rules of a divided town that taught him to mistrust, to hide, to survive. And now, decades later, those same rules echo in this room, in every skeptical glance, every scribbled note, every assumption hanging in the air like smoke. The forensic analyst steps forward next, calm, methodical, shattering another layer of the prosecution's narrative. The footage is inconclusive. Height and build don't match definitively. The timestamp altered, and with each revelation the jury shifts, a shadow of doubt creeping through their faces. The evidence, once thought absolute, begins to unravel, and you, watching, understand that truth is rarely clean. It is messy, complex, often hidden beneath layers of fear and expectation. He sits back, quiet, letting the words settle. The courtroom buzzes, but for him, for you, for anyone paying attention, there is a lesson in this silence. Justice is not about appearances. It is not about assuming guilt based on color, posture, or past mistakes. Justice is about seeing clearly, about confronting uncomfortable truths that most people would rather ignore. And in that stillness you feel it, the power of presence, of dignity, of refusing to vanish under judgment. The fight is far from over, but for the first time in years there is a glimmer that the world might just have to reckon with his truth. He rises to speak, chains clinking softly, and the room seems to hold its breath. Every eye turns toward him, but what they see is not the whole story. What they see is a man accused. What you see is a life lived in shadows, a boy who once trusted you completely, now standing in a courtroom that refuses to look beyond his skin. His voice is quiet, steady, almost fragile, but it carries a raw sincerity that commands attention. "I've made mistakes," he begins, not as an excuse, but as a fact. Every word drips with the weight of experience, of lessons learned the hard way. "I've trusted the wrong people, taken wrong turns, but I didn't do this." He pauses, eyes scanning the jury, searching for acknowledgement that someone, anyone, can see him as more than the charges. It is not a plea for sympathy. It is a demand for recognition, for justice rooted in truth rather than assumption. You remember the boy who taught you courage without ever knowing it. The boy who laughed under the stars, who dared to imagine a world where trust was not a crime. That boy, hidden behind hardened eyes and years of survival, is still here, still fighting. And in his fight, you see a reflection of every person who has been defined by something beyond their control: race, circumstance, the color of their skin, the neighborhood they were born into. The defense attorney guides him gently, allowing him to paint the picture of his reality. The officer who stopped him didn't ask questions, didn't investigate. They assumed, they decided, and that assumption, that blink of prejudice, could have cost him everything. The jury listens, some shifting uncomfortably, as they confront the quiet horror of systemic bias, the invisible chains that hold entire communities under suspicion long before any evidence is presented. And here, in this courtroom, the lesson becomes clear. Innocence is not just a declaration, it is a battle. Freedom is not simply given, it is wrested from the hands of a system that too often judges first and sees later. Every misstep society points to, every stereotype, every quiet judgment becomes a layer in the walls surrounding him. And yet, despite it all, he stands, refusing to vanish. As the room absorbs his words, you feel the weight settle deep inside. This is more than a trial. This is a confrontation with truths most would rather ignore. A reckoning with assumptions, biases, and the quiet, insidious ways the world decides who deserves mercy and who does not. And in that realization, a new understanding takes root. Seeing the truth is a radical act. Recognizing humanity where others see only guilt is a revolution in itself. Comment below, "I see the truth. I see the truth." Say it twice. Let it anchor you. The courtroom hums with anticipation as the defense rests and a strange stillness falls. You notice it immediately, the way the jury shifts, uncertain, grappling with more than facts. They are confronting a truth they weren't prepared for, that lives cannot be measured in hours, that skin color, history, and circumstance carry more weight than any evidence can capture. Each juror carries a story of assumptions, biases, and invisible prejudices, and now, for the first time, they are forced to reconcile those with the man standing before them. He sits quietly, hands clasped, every movement deliberate. No bravado, no theatrics, only the gravity of a life that refuses to be erased. You remember the summers racing through streets, the secret conversations under the magnolia tree, the world as it once seemed possible. The world that promised safety and friendship now feels distant, fragile, nearly lost. And yet, he survives. His presence is a defiance, a quiet reminder that the system, no matter how rigid, cannot completely erase the truth. The prosecutor leans forward, his voice sharp, rehearsed. Consider the evidence, consider the record. He lists dates, times, prior arrests, framens, a narrative of inevitability. But in that room, inevitability has no dominion. Every word he utters is met with invisible resistance, not from argument alone, but from the human understanding that grows quietly in the minds of those listening. The jury's eyes flicker, hesitation creeping where certainty once stood. The evidence, once solid, begins to fracture. And then, the moment that shifts everything, the memory of childhood floods your mind, not just yours, but his. A friendship that transcended invisible lines drawn by a world too eager to divide. A bond unrecognized by society, uncelebrated by history, but alive in its defiance. That memory is dangerous. It reminds you of what justice should feel like. Fairness, empathy, recognition. It reminds the jury unconsciously that human lives cannot be reduced to lines on a paper, that assumptions kill more quietly than violence ever could. Outside the courtroom, the world continues unaware. Inside, the air is electric, taut with revelation. Each juror wrestles with conscience versus conditioning. Each glance at him becomes a decision, to see him as he is, or as the world has told them he must be. And you, watching, understand the stakes. The outcome is not just his life. It is a mirror reflecting every judgment society has ever made, every life it has ever tried to define before understanding. And in the silence, before deliberation begins, the truth settles like dust in the room. Freedom is never given. It is fought for. And sometimes simply surviving, simply refusing to vanish, becomes an act of rebellion against a world that refuses to see. Hours stretch, heavy and suffocating as the jury retreats to deliberate. The courtroom empties slowly, leaving only the echoes of whispers and the faint scent of polished wood. He remains seated, hands clasped, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. There's no fear in his eyes now, only a quiet defiance, a claim on the life that has been threatened by assumptions and misjudgment. You watch, heart taut, knowing that every second brings the world closer to a reckoning it has avoided for decades. Outside, the sun casts long shadows across the courthouse steps. Inside, the air seems almost electric, charged with the weight of choices not yet made. Each juror carries a lifetime of bias, expectation, and preconception, and now they are forced to confront it head-on. They are not just judging a man accused of a crime, they are wrestling with a truth most of society refuses to see. The human cost of prejudice, the fragility of assumptions, the silent violence of systemic neglect. He rises briefly when the jury re-enters, posture straight, chains clinking softly. His eyes meet yours for the first time in hours, a silent question passing between you. Will the world see him as he is, or as it has always wanted to imagine? The room is tense, every heartbeat audible. Words are meaningless now. The verdict will speak louder than any testimony, any cross-examination, any carefully constructed argument. The silence presses down, a weight heavier than any evidence presented. And then, the foreperson stands, trembling, paper in hand. The pause stretches impossibly long, each second a lifetime. The words that follow are simple, devastating, and liberating all at once. Not guilty. Gasps ripple through the room, some shocked, some relieved. The chains that have bound him in more ways than one feel lighter, though the scars remain invisible. The jury has acknowledged something deeper than law, the resilience of a life that refuses to be reduced, the power of truth that cannot be silenced, the courage it takes simply to survive in a world that too often refuses to see. He exhales, a sound of release, of years of tension finally leaving his body. But even in victory there is a weight, memories of every assumption, every whispered judgment, every barrier placed in his path. And you, watching him, understand that justice is never just a verdict, it is recognition, it is seeing the unseen. It is the fragile, fleeting acknowledgement that human life is more than the sum of accusations and more than the expectations society places upon it. In that moment, the room is quiet, yet roaring with unspoken truths. The past lingers, but so does the future. And you, witnessing it all, know this. Seeing the truth is a radical act. Recognizing humanity where others see only guilt is an act of courage that transcends the courtroom itself. The courtroom slowly empties, leaving an almost sacred silence behind. The air carries the faint hum of finality, yet the weight of what just transpired refuses to lift. He stands near the bench, shoulders straight now, but eyes carrying decades of history, moments stolen, opportunities denied, judgments imposed before understanding. You approach him cautiously, knowing that words here are fragile, almost inadequate, yet they are necessary for both of you. You don't owe me anything, he says softly. But there's an edge of curiosity, a quiet plea for recognition. But why didn't you say anything? The question hangs, sharp, demanding. His gaze doesn't waver, searching for truth in your silence. And you realize the burden you carried. The law forced neutrality. The system demanded impartiality. And yet, here it is, humanity clawing its way through procedure. I had to be fair, you admit, voice low but firm. If I had spoken, it could have jeopardized everything. He nods slowly, a mix of hurt and understanding passing over his face. Fair, he repeats, almost bitterly. That's the thing. The world's never been fair, not for people like me. You feel it, every word, every memory, every shadow of a segregated town. Every whispered judgment of the past, pressing down, impossible to ignore. You nod, letting silence speak where words fail. I wish I could have done more, you whisper, almost to yourself, almost as a promise. The courthouse is emptying around you, the echoes of chairs scraping and papers shifting fading into the background. Outside, the sun sets, casting long, distorted shadows across the steps, as if the world itself is stretching to accommodate the truth you both carry. He exhales, a faint smile brushing his lips, the tension in his body easing slightly. We were kids, he says, voice soft. We didn't know any better. But you know now, don't you? You do. And the acknowledgement hangs between you. A recognition that life isn't just about rules or verdicts. It is about seeing people as they truly are, even when the world refuses to. He turns, walking toward the courthouse doors, back straight, moving into the fading light. You remain, alone, tracing your fingers over the gavel, a symbol of law, but now also a reminder of responsibility. Justice isn't only in verdicts. It lives in how you carry yourself, how you recognize truth, how you confront bias, and how you choose to act when the world would rather look away. And as the sun dips below the horizon, you make a silent vow. The past cannot be changed, but the future can be different. It will be difficult, perhaps impossible, but for him, for yourself, for every unseen life shaped by assumption and prejudice, it must be tried. Because in truth, the smallest act of recognition can become the most radical form of justice. The courthouse is quiet now, empty halls echoing footsteps that seem heavier than usual. You stand alone at the bench, the gavel cold beneath your fingers, yet the weight of what has unfolded presses deeper than any object could. Outside, the world continues, oblivious to the intimate reckoning that just occurred. But inside, a truth lingers, a truth most would rather ignore. Justice is not a system. Justice is a responsibility, a fragile, relentless demand to see people fully, even when every instinct tells you to look away. He is gone from the room, vanished into the fading sunlight, yet his presence remains, a shad, now imprinted on the walls, in the wood, in the air itself. You realize something unsettling. The trial didn't end with a verdict. It ended with awakening. For the jury, yes. For the courtroom, yes. But most of all, for you. The black robes, the gavel, the procedure, none of it mattered as much as this. Recognition. A simple act of seeing the human being behind the assumptions, behind the charges, behind the history of a world too eager to judge. And now, you know it. The bitter truth the world avoids. Systems can fail. People can fail. But what cannot fail is the choice to act, to see, to honor the humanity in others even when the world says it's impossible. That choice carries consequences, yes, and it carries risk. But it also carries redemption. Redemption not just for the accused, but for anyone willing to confront the darkness they've inherited, the biases they carry, and the complacency they've tolerated. You think of him one last time, the boy you knew, the man he became, the life he survived. You understand now that every judgment made in haste, every assumption based on fear, leaves a scar deeper than any prison. And yet, there is hope, a quiet, defiant hope that truth, when recognized, can overturn a lifetime of neglect. That recognition, no matter how delayed, has the power to transform not just a verdict, but a society. The room is still, the shadows long, the silence heavy. And you whisper, almost as if speaking to him, almost as if speaking to yourself, justice is not what the world tells you. Justice is what you choose to see. Let that echo in your mind. Let it unsettle you. Let it force you to reconsider every assumption you've ever made, because the story doesn't end here. The story continues, in the streets, in the courts, in every life that the world refuses to fully recognize. And somewhere in the distance, you sense him moving forward, free in body, in Delhi, marked by life, yet unstoppable. You are left with the haunting realization that true justice is never neat. It is messy, painful, and human. It is recognition. It is courage. And if you can see it, truly see it, you are no longer just a witness. You are part of the story, part of the reckoning, part of the change the world desperately needs.